Welcome, everybody, to the EOC APR webinar. Um, I'm Lisa Redamozo with the Nosotros Education Center. I also have with me Lourdes Maria Zavala, and she will be co-presenting with me. I'll be answering questions in the Q&A. And Lourdes, I want to hand it over to you so you can take us through this new thing. Every year there's something new and, it kind of throws us off. And I think it's great that, Lourdes is the one who says, Lisa, we really need to talk about this with folks, because if they don't handle it now or become familiar with something new right now, it could throw them off once they get all their data together and they try to do it on the tail end. You don't want to do that. So we're going to spend some time talking about this. So Lourdes, thank you so much. Take it away.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and especially for getting ready now early. As Lisa mentioned, usually we find something new, not a whole lot new happened with the APR, but this is something that's new and something significant. And really something that, as Lisa said, we want to make sure that we take care of right away. And that's with this new user guide that's going to be provided for you all regarding a new digital signature process. For those of you who've submitted annual performance reports in the past, you know that we've typically uploaded and gotten all of our details ready for the APR. And then at the very end of the process, we've downloaded a signature page and our directors have signed. And then we usually go out and we try to find our certifying official to sign. And then we scan this document that we upload back to the Department of Education. And then that completes our APR submission process. This year, however, the department has moved towards acquiring digital signatures for our directors and our certifying officials. And so the legwork that we probably want to take now is in trying to find out who is our certifying official, and most specifically, whether that certifying official has been approved by the department as our certifying official. We also want to make sure that we take that time to prepare our certifying officials for this new digital signature. Because what we will do when we submit our APR is that the directors will need to log in, identify the certifying official, and then share permissions for that certifying official to be able to log in and also certify that the APR has now been submitted. So please take that moment that you have now to review. And if you need to, send an email message to your program officer to find out, is this my certifying official? Other things you might want to look at is look at your email messages from your program officers. Sometimes they have already included the certifying official. If you do not know who your certifying official is and or are going to need to ask permissions, then be ready to do that process. Because once the APR website goes live, and right now we're hearing that the APR website will go live in January, possibly with the February APR submission date. But when that APR website goes live, you're going to need to log in and either identify who your certifying official is, or you will need to go ahead and ask for a certifying official to be identified and get your permission set for that individual to be approved. The manual and the guide that you are seeing online is currently the one that's being shared by Student Support Services, but you're going to see this in the EOC website once it goes live. The guide is very useful and very helpful in trying to help you identify what you will see when you log into the APR website. Some things that will be really important is that the certifying official, once they are approved, will also need to make sure that they have a login.gov account. And so again, that's why you want to take care of that process early on, is make sure that they are logging in and that they have any permissions set. Once you and your certifying official are ready, and or you need to ask for permissions, then you will see that you can log into trio.ed.gov. You'll click on login. This will immediately take you to the login.gov website. If you're a new director and this is the first time that you're submitting an APR, you also want to make sure that you have a login.gov account. You'll notice that here on the slide, you can see on this guide that you can create your login or sign in if you already have one. You'll be prompted to, if you're new, to set up a duo authentication factor. And so you'll go through that process. Once the APR website goes live, then you will log into trio.ed.gov. You'll log into login.gov, and then you'll notice that here at step 3, you'll be able to identify who your certifying official is.
Lourdes, sorry to interrupt. Could you make this a little bigger? Because I think it
Sure.
minimizes, you know how it
Yeah,
does. Thank you
no,
so much. Appreciate it.
for sure. And so you'll notice that you will have an opportunity to say, and the web tool will come up and it'll say, this is who we have as your certifying official. If you indicate yes, then you'll be able to go ahead and go on with the APR submission process. If it's no, then you'll be prompted to fill out another form where you identify your certifying official. And then that will go from the contractor who's capturing our information for the APR back to your program specialist for approval. And then they'll have to wait in order for those to be processed. And that's again why we're recommending that you complete that process once the APR website goes live, or do the legwork now and ensure that you already know who your certifying official is. You'll notice that if you're not ready that the APR website go live to find out, and you're still trying to find out who your certifying official is, you can choose the option skip. And that will allow you to get into the APR website to begin gathering your information. However, you will not be able to submit until you have identified a certifying official. So again, please make sure that you do this legwork ahead of time. You'll notice that if you click on no to say this is not my certifying official, then you will come to a form where you'll need to fill out who the certifying official is. You'll also, in this process, be able to identify other users. So the form looks almost similar where it says request user access. But if you have a data entry person, you can fill out a similar form to this one to getting information. So you'll notice that here at the roll, the very bottom, just before where it clicks on send, here the option is showing certifying official. But this similar form, you can, on that drop down and enter menu, you'll be able to choose a data entry user. So if you have somebody helping you, okay? Again, skip if you need to, but you need to make sure that you do have a certifying official before the APR is submitted. A couple of things that you'll notice through this guide is it's very helpful. The instructions are very clear. That where you'll designate your certifying official. Some other things that are helpful in this guide is that it'll show you that what does that look like when once the project director or somebody needs to certify. That this particular slide is showing you that if you log in to the director logs into the APR website, if anything is pending, the submission and signatures, you'll notice that it says pending. And then the director can click on go and provide their approval and certification. If the director has signed in and approved, you'll notice it says approved by the project director. Once the certifying official is, you'll also see approved by both the project director and the certifying official. The third case down here is that if only the project director has given their signature, then you'll see project director only. And so these are the various things that you'll see within the status of the signature by the individual that's logged in. So you won't see all of these. You'll notice that these are just examples of what it might look like when you need to provide your approval and certification. Okay. So please download this document, get familiar with it, and your task at hand right now will be to find out who is my certifying official, seek those approvals once the APR website goes live. So don't wait till the very end. I've been working with several SSS projects who 3 weeks later were still waiting to get their certifying official, and now they're getting really overwhelmed because they can't submit their APR, and their deadline is coming through at the end of this week. So please, again, don't wait till the very end. Lisa, is there anything you'd like to add?
I was just going to confirm because that there's no way you can do this until your EOC website becomes live. But it's the first thing you should do the minute it becomes live.
Yeah, but what you can do right now is this portion of it, you can't certify it till the website goes live, the APR website goes live.
You can start
However,
talking to people.
however, you can send a quick note to your program specialist and say, hey, is this my certifying official? Um, and so, and then hopefully when the APR website goes live and the form comes up and says, is this your certifying official? Then you can just click on yes and continue with the APR submission process.
Okay, great. So don't wait just because you can't get access to this particular site. Start talking to people right now and start emailing your program officer to confirm who the certifying official is. Correct, Lourdes?
Yes.
Right.
The other thing is you definitely want to share this document with your certifying official so that they're aware of this change in terms of getting a signature. Okay, because you definitely don't want to wait till the very end and then find out they're not going to be in town also on the date that you need to submit it. Because the other change that we're seeing with this signature page is that before we had 5 days to submit the signature and upload that document, but now they're going to 2 days. And so they're going to need to log in, certify within 2 days. We hear that future APR submissions are going to need an immediate response from the certifier.
Wow, that's interesting. And that 2 days, y'all, is really with folks with SSS that were trying to do it during this holiday weekend or the week. It was very, it made people anxious because some of them had to wait to submit because they didn't think their person was going to be around, in next 2 business days. So hopefully the due date for this won't, like you anticipate, it'll be later after the holidays, so that won't be an added stress. Thanks, Lourdes. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So definitely stay on top of that. And, now that you're aware of this change, you can plan accordingly. So some different things about when we do submit the APR. And for those of you who are new and this is the first time you're submitting, once we get through the APR submission process, and we'll get to that here in just a bit, the APR, the details are entered into a web form. And at the very end of the APR submission process, you'll have an opportunity to preview the PDF. So you'll notice right here in the middle of the screen, you can preview the PDF, and it will be important for you to go ahead and take a look at that report, to look at prior experience points, how you did on your objectives. The other thing is you won't have a download data tab. However, you'll notice that right here in the very center, you'll have a summary of your policies and procedures for assessing your prior experience points. Typically, it's been included in the PDF report, but what we're thinking is that they're probably going to separate it out like they did in SSS. But look in both places so that you have a really good understanding of what your prior experience points are. And you'll also notice that the form is going to have the certification, this little check mark here, right where it says required, where the directors will need to check to say, to the best of my knowledge, it's true, accurate, complete. I have documentation to support what I've reported in this APR. That's the director acknowledging that that information is true and readily verifiable. Once this check mark has happened, then the director can go ahead and click on approve. Once the approve button is indicated, a message will be sent to the certifying official to indicate that the APR has been now signed by the project director and they need to log in through login.gov, go to login, do the duo authentication, and then also log in and certify and approve. And then that will complete your APR submission process. The directors, the certifying officials, data entry users will all be included in the email notification process so that everyone is aware of where the APR is with respect to its submission. Now, oftentimes, I've submitted my APR and I'm not quite ready to hit the APR. Sometimes I just click on download the PDF report. If I need to send that on to somebody, who wants to review it before you hit submit, then you can send them the PDF document. log out of the system. And then when you're ready to log back in, then you can go ahead and do that. But that allows you to have a little bit of downtime to preview that report before you actually hit submit. Okay, so those are just a couple of tips that I do and I look at carefully before I hit and submit my APR.
And it's pretty fast, y'all. I've gone through about 6 submissions so far.
Mhm.
And once they're ready to submit, like you said, after they reviewed everything and they feel comfortable submitting, immediately there's 2 emails that they get, one right after the other, letting you know. So there should not be any delay in receiving verification that at least, the director's portion has been done. And then it lets you know there's a detailed email that says now your certifying official needs to do their part. So just letting you know, it's been pretty quick. So thank you, Lourdes, for taking us through that. I don't see any questions right now. They may have questions later or as they get a chance to look at this form. But I think now we're going to dive into the actual EOC format that we don't anticipate any changes in, I don't think, right? In the 23-24.
No, no. And so we will. I think the last thing we want to mention is that don't wait till the very end again to get your APR in. When they do announce those dates, because and Lisa, I think we've experienced in SSS that the website has gone down, the APR website. And so we don't know what attributed to it, but don't let that happen to you. Get your APR in as quickly. We know most of the information already that's going into this APR, so there really shouldn't be, major delays that are keeping you from capturing this information.
Right. I mean, with SSS, because we have that spreadsheet, so it did catch some errors, so we had to go back and forth. But there's no attachment that needs to be uploaded with EOC. So if we check and verify things internally, you should spend very little time on the website, the Department of Ed APR website. If it all goes well. And thank you for blowing that up too. I was just going to ask you to blow it up. Thank you. I should wear my glasses probably.
Oh no, that's quite all right. I'm glad that we're focusing in on a little bit more.
Thank you all, and I'll be answering Q&A as we go through this. Please don't hesitate to ask us any and all questions. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you, Lisa. So I really want to thank Lisa ahead of time because right now, if you go out and you definitely want to explore the TRIO homepage because they have been updating it. It looks different than when we've been there in the last couple of years to get ready for the APR. And right now, many of the links are broken. And so because it's not quite fully functional yet. So thank you, Lisa, again, for editing this document and Donna for, the work that you all have put into updating this document. But you'll notice that the date and reference to the annual performance reporting period has been updated. So where it's highlighted in red is our updates and our references for the 23-24 reporting period. Once the APR website does go live, you'll definitely want to download the letter, all of the instructions, and all of the information for the APR. But for now, there's no major changes to the APR from last year. For those of you who are new looking at this, we'll go ahead and do a detailed review of it because we want to make sure that you're ready. Okay. So when you log into the APR website, you will have a web form that has the information regarding your project. So section 1 of the APR is the certification and warning. A lot of the information at the website will be pre-populated with regards to your project number, the name of the grantee, and details. You can go ahead and fill in the details of who is the data entry person. If the director will not have a data entry person, then they'll definitely need to list themselves again because these will be required fields for the data entry. Okay. We saw that within the web tool, you'll have the certification and warning. So the edits that we'll expect to see once the APR form becomes live is that there'll be edits with reference to no longer uploading a document, but something that's more with respect to this digital signature. However, you'll notice from that last slide, we will see that we are still certifying and understand the warning about any information that we include in here. is subject to fines, imprisonment, or both if we don't give factual information on this, and at least to the best of our knowledge. Okay, so section 2 of the APR, and when we think about the EOC APR, there are really 4 sections. That first section 1 that we just looked at, the certification, the information about our project, and then section 2 is the demographic information, where we tell them really through numbers a story about our EOC program and what we did in the 23-24 reporting period. Everything is strictly numbers. There is very little, if any, narrative that will address competitive preference priorities, but the majority of our responses are with filling in numbers on a web form. And so we'll provide that information in section 2 regarding our participants. In section 3, we will fill out some information regarding the educational status of participants regarding their grade level at the time of first service. And then in section 4, we're telling about the outcomes. What happened with those students as a result of receiving EOC services? But let's go ahead and take a look at section 2. Section 2 will fill in some information. It'll be pre-populated with respect to the number that we're funded to serve. And then you'll notice that in the next few sections of this, section 1, we'll fill in some information about how many participants were served during the reporting period that were new and or continuing. It's important that as we begin thinking about these numbers and we're filling in, that the department is just using our responses to this to help determine whether we met substantial progress and whether we are in compliance with regards to the participants that were served. And so when we tell them about the number of students, participants that we served, that we have a really good understanding about the regulations. Who is eligible to be served by our EOC program? What's the eligibility and the documentation that we have to support that they're low income and or first generation? Because here we're strictly providing numbers. The department will use that to say, okay, did you meet the number funded to serve? Did you make substantial progress? Meaning, did you serve at least, the 75% of the numbers that you were funded to serve, or 85%, or what are our requirements based on the number of years that were served? I mentioned the year because I know that in the last grant competition, there were some projects who had a year later that they started the grant cycle than others, okay? So I do want to acknowledge that. But for us in EOC, it is a PE year, and so we need to determine, where are we at with respect to earning prior experience points. And we know that we will only receive prior experience points if we serve 90% of our numbers. Okay? So in this profile, we begin to tell them about those students. We know they're eligible EOC participants. How many of them were new, served for the very first time in the 23-24 reporting period? And then how many were continuing? Continuing meaning they have been served in a prior year with some EOC services. In eligibility, we'll tell them about the number of students that were both first generation low income, the number of students that were low income and potential first generation, and then those that are other, meaning they were neither first gen or low income. The department for these and the tool itself will look at the number of total participants served as the denominator, and the number of students that we count, or participants that we count in B1, to identify the number of students that were both first generation low income as the numerator, to determine did we meet the 2/3 criterion of participants being both first generation low income. The other demographic profile we provide are simply with regards to the student's race and ethnicity, their gender, their age at the time of service, and whether those individuals were of limited English proficiency. And then in section G, we're reporting on whether those participants are served by another federally funded program. We understand that even though G4, talent search, is listed here, in the regulations, an EOC program cannot serve a talent search student at the same time, nor should a talent search program serve an EOC participant at the same time. EOC projects, however, can serve other Upward Bound students, veterans Upward Bound, Gear Up students, student support services, and any other federally funded programs that are college access programs. And here we're simply providing the number of individuals served by any of those other programs. And this should total the number of participants that were served. I'm sorry, served by another federally funded program, okay? In Section H, we typically in EOC do not serve specific target schools unless they were written into our grants, or sometimes we might visit those schools. But here, if we had something, a school, a target school that was written into our grant, then we would provide the NCESS school ID number and then indicate the number of students that were served at that school. But again, the majority of our EOC programs did not write grants where we specifically identified a target school. But if it is applicable, please fill in that information and indicate the number of students served at those schools. Section I allows us to respond to the competitive preference priorities with respect to military or veteran connected students, and then by providing the number of students, and then in the other two to allow us to respond to the other competitive preference priorities. You'll notice that in many of these cases, they'll allow us to respond. And so oftentimes I will take a Word document, type in my response to this, and then fill it out, because we don't have a whole lot of space. They want to know, but they don't want to know because they only give you a certain number of characters to be able to respond to whether you implemented specific activities in response to the competitive preference priorities. The CPP, or indicated here, number 2, is allowing you to respond to whether you provided any activities that help participants obtain post-secondary credentials. And then in the second CPP, we responded to whether you engaged in different activities. I remember 500 words or less to indicate what specific activities did you define in your logic model that you engage students in now. And so you would address that for the CPPs. There are no prior experience points that are tied to the CPPs. They're just asking you to respond to them because the majority of us wrote for the CPPs and they want to know how we implemented them. Section 3 from the annual performance report, again, is what helps us to define the educational status at the time of first service. And so when we bring in a participant into EOC, we do typically an assessment, or we determine, what is your grade level now? What are the services you need? And then we hope to try to achieve, whatever they need and help us achieve our own objectives. So within Section 3, we have the varying educational levels, considering, the EOC participants that are eligible to receive services. And when we begin identifying, what is the educational level for the participants, and we use our data systems to allow us to start capturing that information. So we have a number of different educational levels, given the participants that we're working with. And so what we see within EOC is that we might often work with a participant who is 19 and older, but yet we might often work with participants who are under 19. But we don't want to lose focus on that EOC is an adult program and that the majority of our participants should be 19 and older. The regulations say that you can serve participants under 19. However, we do not want to dilute the intent for which EOC exists. And that, again, is to work with individuals 19 and older. So when we look at Section 3, we'll notice that we have 2 sections, Sections A and Sections B, that allows us to identify the number of participants by educational level. once we begin populating our databases and finding out these numbers, then we begin identifying some denominators, who's going to be counted for particular objectives. Let's go ahead and take a look at what some of those descriptors are for the educational levels. In A1, we're looking at adults without a secondary school credential that are enrolled as a high school senior. When we look at that description, that enrolled as a high school senior or equivalent to a high school senior helps us understand that we're really looking at, in our EOC program, those individuals that will obtain a credential by the end of the reporting period, or August 31st. I like to use that and keep that in the back of my mind as I'm thinking about who I'm going to include in this A1 number. In A2, we're identifying in adults without a secondary school credential, okay? I'm going to skip the A1 and A5 for now. Let's go ahead and go to A3 in the description. And here we're looking at high school graduates or individuals who have a high school equivalency credential and are not in post-secondary ed. In A4, we're counting those post-secondary dropouts that have a secondary school diploma or they have a credential and they're not enrolled in post-secondary ed. Number 5, A5, are post-secondary dropouts who do not have a secondary school diploma or a credential. In A6, we have individuals who are post-secondary transfers. The post-secondary transfers are individuals that may have a certificate, an associate's degree, and are wanting your assistance in transferring to another institution. They could be going from a certificate to an associate's program, associates to a 4-year program, and so on. A7 includes those participants that are already in college. They are already a post-secondary student. In A8, we have other participants who are 19 and older, and they do not fall into any one of the previous categories. In A9, we have individuals that may be unknown. We're assisting them, but we're not able to determine where they are at with respect to their educational level. It's important to note that I skipped, A2, that description of neither belong in A1 nor A5. And I wanted to exclude them because in A1, I'm identifying individuals who are equivalent to a high school senior. Again, thinking that they are going to obtain a credential by August 31st. And so those are my individuals that I'm anticipating they need a little bit longer time. And I know that's really common for my EOC adults, especially, that they may need 2 or 3 years to earn their GED. And I don't want to be able to say they're going to finish by August 31st and then enroll in post-secondary ed. So I want to include in A2 those individuals that I'm anticipating don't have a secondary school credential, nor will they have one by August 31st. Similar to those individuals in A5, I'm anticipating that they do not have a credential, nor will they get that by August 31st. When I look at the next group of individuals, my high school age students, here, these are individuals that do not have or are equivalent to a high school senior and are under age 19. In B1, I'll include any of my participants that are high school non-seniors. So essentially, I'm thinking about them in being in grades 9 through 11. In B2, I'm thinking about those participants who are in high school senior or they're in a GED program equivalent to a 12th grade. In B3, I'm including my participants that are secondary school dropouts. So they have dropped out of high school and they're not currently enrolled in high school. And then my other participants who are not 18 and they just don't fall into any of those other categories. When I think about these two sections, A and B, the number of participants that I place in here will all total to the number of participants that I served in the reporting period. Now, When I look at these values, I notice that some of these participants are being grouped differently because they are going to form a denominator and are going to allow me to determine the outcomes for my objectives. I know I have 4 different objectives, and the first of those objectives is the number of participants who earn a secondary school credential, either a high school diploma or a GED. My next objective is with regards to those participants who are equivalent to a senior or are college ready, somebody who already has a high school diploma or a GED or a post-secondary transfer. Then those would be individuals that are going to be considered for the admissions objective and for the financial aid objective. My last objective is with respect to post-secondary enrollment. And for this objective, I'm considering those students who are equivalent to a high school senior and whether they obtain either a high school diploma or a equivalency, and or whether they already had a credential, like a diploma or a GED. So those individuals essentially in my A3s. You'll notice that there are other groups of participants that did not earn any type of credential. So my post-secondary students, those who are already in college, or my other participants, 19 and older, or those that are unknown. While they will help me meet my number, the number funded to serve, they are not evaluated in any objective. So this particular section 3, I went ahead and Lisa, I'm going to go ahead and give this to you so we can put this into the Google Docs. But I wanted to share this because this is really helpful for me to think about who gets counted in these objectives. You'll notice here's the A1 through A9s and the B1 through B4. And if I think about the numbers, once I start putting this into my table, I can see like who's going to be counted for my first objective. The number of individuals that I report in A1 plus A2 plus A5, and anybody that are high school age students or under 19 will all count in the denominator for this first objective. Those individuals that I consider to be college ready will be those individuals that I'm indicating are equivalent to a high school senior in A1. Those who already have a certificate or a GED diploma in A3. The post-secondary dropouts who already have a diploma or a credential, and those post-secondary transfers, plus those seniors who are equivalent to a high school senior. Okay, so any numbers that I put into these particular values on that table will form the denominator for the second objective. Similarly, for objective 3, those that I put in A1, A3, A4, A6, and B2 will form the denominator for my post-secondary admissions objective. The fourth objective with regards to post-secondary enrollment involves 2 categories of participants. You'll notice that in this column, the first column for objective 4, I've indicated A1 and then a little G by it. The individuals that I will consider for my secondary enrollment individuals are those that graduate or those that obtain a credential. So while I may have, for example, let's say I had 200 in my in objective 1, but in objective 4, I'm only concerned about those 200 that actually obtained a diploma or obtained a GED or equivalency credential will form the denominator. So you'll notice that of A1, of those individuals who were high school equivalent, also anybody that I might report in A2, that even though I might have said, well, they might not finish by August 31st, but then they happen to, get a GED, then I want to know about them because they will form part of that denominator. And then in any of my A5, those post-secondary dropouts who didn't have a post-secondary credential and actually come back and get a GED, then those individuals will form the denominator. You'll also notice that even though I might have a 9th through 11th grader, any of those that graduated early, any of those seniors that are those high school seniors that were equivalent to a 12th grader that graduate, and any of those secondary school dropouts that maybe come back, get their GED, are counted in this denominator, and any other participants that are not older than 18 that also might earn a credential. So any of those that, again, obtain a high school diploma or they earn a GED certificate or equivalency will form part of the denominator towards this objective 4. The second part of that is all those other individuals that I already knew had a high school diploma. So anybody that was a high school graduate or had an equivalency in A3, any of those that were in A4, they were a post-secondary dropout and already had a secondary school diploma or credential, and then any of my post-secondary transfers. So essentially, any of those who graduate or attain a credential, plus those who already had a credential will form the denominator that will be evaluated for this post-secondary enrollment objective. Okay. This is a very complex table, and I wanted you all to really understand who is being evaluated. But then again, you'll notice A7, A8, and A9 count towards your numbers, but they're not being evaluated for any objectives.
Lourdes, this is awesome. Very awesome, because this is sometimes the hardest thing where you don't realize till you do the APR. If you look at this at the beginning of every year or during the year, you can already plan when you look at your section 2 and 3, really 3, at any point in time during the year, you can already tell who's going to count toward what objectives and where to put focus on, right? Monitoring. It's very, very useful as a management tool, not just a reporting tool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and Lisa, you mentioned something that's really important, as a data management tool. So we really want to use our database to help us plan accordingly.
During the year.
Even when I look at this and I think about this objective 4, this A1 and the G, the graduates, I shouldn't just be focusing on this group. I'm just helping them graduate and or get that GED credential. I should be helping them also with admissions and financial aid, because if they graduate, they're going to count in my denominator for these 2 objectives.
Right. So sometimes it can actually change, right? Sometimes you start with someone who doesn't have a GED, and they not only, if you time it right, they end up getting the GED during the year, but then if they also go on, they'll actually help you for more of the objectives than originally planned.
Yep. So this, I think, is really helpful. So I'll make sure that you get this image.
Thank you.
You can use that as you're preparing.
I appreciate that, because that helps in so many ways. Of course, first and foremost with the APR, but also in management in the current year that you're in. Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was.
Yeah. So I know I like to have that always when we're working on our coding and getting the data into our database. Okay. So again, we have now accounted for everyone's educational level. And then that particular slide that I just showed, that image, will show you who's being looked at for each of those denominators. The instructions in the form, and the one that we're looking at now in the draft form, do have it as a narrative. And so that's this right here where it's saying the denominator and the numerator is referring to that image. I just like to look at something more visual to help me focus and at the data that I'm looking at versus a narrative like this. So I hope the image works for you and helps you as you're preparing that. Okay. So as I mentioned, those individuals that we find in the denominator for our first objective, those individuals that we've counted in A1, A2, A5, and any of those high school age students, will form the denominator. And then for those individuals, then we want to respond, what happened to them for this very first objective? They were participants that were served and they didn't have a secondary school diploma or its equivalent. And our objective is that how many of those will receive a diploma or its equivalent. So that group of students will break them down into this 8-1 through 8-6. We'll tell them how many of them received a diploma or its equivalent, how many were enrolled in an alternative education program but didn't complete, how many of those were enrolled in high school but didn't complete, how many of those were not enrolled in high school or an alternative education program, how many of them became deceased, and how many of them were known. And so once we account for everybody, the department will take, and the tool, because it's going to give you the response immediately, to say how many of those did we put in A1? And A1 divided by the total number, what's in A7, is going to be A1 is the numerator divided by the total number of participants that we're evaluating in this denominator is going to give us a percentage. So the numerator divided by the denominator is going to tell us, did we meet that objective or not? When we get into the web form, it's going to be pre-populated with the percent that we're being measured against. And so we need to make sure that that percent is correct. And then we'll be able to determine, did we meet our objective? You know, by simply taking the numerator, the number in A1, and dividing it by the total number that were participants that did not have a secondary school diploma or its equivalent. Okay, so if we meet that, we will earn some prior experience points. So that's our first objective. I mentioned in our second objective, we're looking at participants who either have that credential or are equivalent to a high school senior. And so for this particular group of students, again, we're looking at anybody that is in an A1, A3, A4, A6, and a B2, and that image that I just showed you. And that forms the denominator. And then in objective B, they want to know how many of those students actually completed a financial aid application. B1 divided by the number of students that are in this category will help us determine whether we met our pre-approved objective, again, which will be pre-populated, to determine if we met this objective and earned any prior experience points. So, you'll notice that within the instructions, and because I'm not showing you the instructions now, but financial aid application is not simply referring to the FAFSA, okay? They're looking at, did you help them with any scholarships? Did you help them with any loan applications? Did you help them with anything that was financial to help a student pay for their college coursework? Okay, and so that's what you're going to be responding to with respect to the number of students that completed financial aid application. So you want to make sure within the documentation side of it that you have something that helps you determine that did they apply for financial aid or seeking any funding, okay? Work study, anything that is going to help them for financial aid. Okay. For our third objective is with post-secondary admissions. And here we're looking at the number of students that actually applied for admission. So they actually applied, and you have documentation that supports that those students who were either equivalent to a high school senior or already had a GED or a high school diploma, whether they applied for post-secondary admissions. Now, we'll fill out that information if the number C1 divided by the total number of C4 meets the percentage that's you're approved, you'll earn prior experience points or not. Okay? So that's how they will assess that objective. You'll notice, though, that as we looked at this very first objective for secondary school diploma and the ones for financial aid and admissions application, you'll notice that in objective A, we had an A5 for deceased participants. in objective A, the very first objective, if you had deceased participants, they are removed from the denominator. And so they don't impact you. They will be removed from the denominator before the objective is analyzed and the extent to which you accomplished it. Okay, so again, remember, any deceased participants for this first objective are removed. You'll notice, however, for those last two objectives that we just reviewed, financial aid and admissions, any deceased participants are not removed from these two objectives. Okay, so I did want to make sure that I point that out. Okay, our last objective is post-secondary education enrollment. And there are a couple of things that are really important about post-secondary enrollment objective, even before we look at this section. And when we submitted our grants and when we submitted our very first annual performance report, we had some decisions that we needed to make regarding who we were going to evaluate for post-secondary enrollment. And so we had to select options 1 and option 2. So let me take this down a little bit. And the very first option was, who did we interpret to be the group of participants that we were going to say we will report on for post-secondary enrollment? So you'll notice that in option 1, we're indicating that the number of participants that received a high school diploma or equivalent during the reporting period. And so in this first option, if we interpreted that the individuals we would confirm post-secondary enrollment for is only those participants that received a high school diploma or an equivalency credential within the reporting period, then we understood those identified as equivalent to seniors would be our denominator. Option 2, however, was going to say, no, not only am I considering those who earned a diploma or a high school equivalency, but I am also going to include in my denominator those participants that were college ready because they had already graduated and had a diploma before I started working with them, a post-secondary dropout, or a post-secondary transfer. And so it was a much larger group of individuals if I selected option 2.
Lourdes, I had a question about that, if you don't mind. Could you raise that a little bit higher and then make it a little bit bigger?
Sure.
And for my, because, and you said the key word there, yeah, if you can make it a little bigger too, that would be great. The key difference is to me, just initially looking at this once a year, right? And studying it once a year, is that I have more of a pool of folks that could qualify for this objective if I use option 2. Correct?
If you selected option 2.
Okay, if I select option 2, I have more folks, more of a larger pool of people that have to meet that percentage. Whereas if I go with number 1, there's fewer folks that would, you know, that I have to make sure they achieve that objective.
That is correct, Lisa.
Okay.
And again, it was because of interpretation. And so when we submitted the first APR for this grant cycle in 21-22, then that's when the decision was made. So if you're new and this is the first time that you're submitting, you can't change it, okay? Because whoever the director or the individual that submitted the APR for 21-22 for the grant cycle made that decision. 22-23, even for those who might have had a year later that was their first year in this grant cycle, that decision was made in 22-23, okay? So you can't change it now in the 23-24 reporting period. So either option 1 or option 2 was already selected for you. But it's important to note who is in my denominator. Is it the smaller group, only those high school equivalent students and participants, or is it option 2, those high school equivalent participants plus those who already had a credential, okay? And so the department is still going to use your responses in this table to determine whether you met your objective based on your responses in D1 and D2. Okay, so let's look at those options that we have here. Okay, so in D1, I'm looking at how many of those participants were those high school aged. So if I think about this, in A1, when I did this A1 APR, I already told them about those students, the high school age students that, or individuals that got a diploma within the reporting period. Okay, so A1 is going to give me my answer for both, whether you selected option 1 or 2, is going to give me my answer for D1. Okay, they received a secondary school diploma or equivalent during the reporting period. Okay, and so I want to include those individuals here, but you'll notice that this has a second part of this that's saying and enrolled. So I know that my denominator is the number of students is going to include those who got a credential, and now I have to kind of like separate those out, right? So from that A1, how many did get the credential during the year but enrolled in post-secondary ed, and they'll be included in D1. Okay, the rest of them, so part of that group from A1 is going to go into D1, and then the other group might go into somewhere else, into D3, D4, it's unknown. I don't know what happened to them. But I need to account for all of those in somewhere within this table. In D2 is where I'm going to count for all of those other individuals, those the ones that were in A3, in A5, in my other group that how many of those already had a credential and enrolled in post-secondary ed, and then the remaining will also be, scattered amongst my D3s, D4s, and D5s. So now I'm accounting for everybody that I remember that chart that I provided, and I said, here's the potential of people who could have enrolled, anybody that earned a credential plus anybody that already had a credential. And so maybe I should go back to that image. Okay, so everybody here, those that earned a degree, if I were to count here plus these, that should total what that chart is. Okay, I mean, that's a little bit confusing because right here, we don't know the actual number unless we know how many actually graduated or got a diploma or a equivalency certificate. Okay, so as you review your data, you want to review that carefully. What happened to them with regards to their outcomes? Okay, and you're going to include them here on their outcomes for those individuals. Okay, sorry, I know that's a little bit confusing, but that number here, you'll notice it says D6 should total A1 plus anybody A3, A4, and A6. So use this to help as a guide for what these numbers should total. Okay, so, and then the tool is again going to determine how you responded to this option 1 or 2. Is it going to A, interpret your objective to say the number here divided by the number of participants that received the credential, or is it going to look at the number that enrolled, the value of D1 plus D2, divided by all of this to determine whether you met the objective using option number 2. Okay, so again, just to stress that again, A1 is telling you how many got the diploma, secondary school diploma. So they're taking, the denominator is the value A1. The numerator is your D1 if you chose option number 1. If you chose option number 2, then they're looking at D6 as being your denominator and D1 plus D2 to be the numerator. And if you met the numerator divided by the denominator, if you met your objective, then you'll earn prior experience points.
So Lourdes, this is why I desperately need a database to help me during the year. And it's so important, y'all, whatever database you utilize, the definition for grade standing when they're first served each year is critical for you to categorize them from the get-go and to put them in the right category. And whether it's your spreadsheet or whatever database you're utilizing to help you with this denominator, numerator thing and the percentage thing. So please keep that in mind. That's why that showing or having that chart that you showed us is so very, very important. Because no matter what you use, the definitions for their status is still the same. And like you said, Lourdes, earlier, although we need everybody that's eligible to count toward our 850, for example, or higher, only some of those 850 or your total numbers served get to compete for the objectives.
That is true.
But if you didn't have enough or the right number, then you don't get to play for all the points, just for some of them. And if you're less than 90%, you don't get any points if it's a year that they're doing prior experience. So thanks.
Yep.
It all comes back to that.
Yep. You'll also notice that in evaluating this particular objective, D4, okay, the number of participants who become deceased, they are also removed from the denominator, and so they don't impact your post-secondary enrollment objective. Okay. Sometimes I like to evaluate this, and sometimes, you know, depending on where I'm at, like when I do my annual performance report, if I'm that close, like if I'm like within 1 percentage point and of meeting my objective, and I have a huge number of participants that are in unknown, I'm going to go and look for those unknowns. I'm going to, you know, sometimes I can't find them in the National Student Clearinghouse. I'm going to do something different, maybe start reaching out to those individuals because I might need only 1 or 2 participants to meet that objective. But, you know, be careful if when you have too many unknowns. The department will also, in some of the annual performance reports, when you indicate too many unknowns, the department wants to know. You know, one thing I forgot to mention is, and let me go back to that too, because this is something that's really common within the EOC APR with regards to Section 3. I just remembered this, I apologize. But if you put anybody in A8, other participant, or A9, then you will be prompted to provide a response. Even if you have 1 person counted in A8 or A9, you will be prompted to provide a response of who are you including here? They want a description of who you've included in that unknown. Who might that be? When I think about EOC participants, sometimes we have participants that we truly don't know their educational level. They've been out of the educational system for so long. And, you know, we don't have, you know, a GED pretest to figure out like how far they are. Sometimes, you know, we just can't figure out. Sometimes in EOC, we might work with participants who are bringing a credential from another country, and we're trying to assess, does that count a degree? Does that not count for a degree? And we're trying to determine, you know, I think about in Mexico, right? In Mexico, they give a degree and they call it bachillerato. Well, so it sure sounds like a bachelor's degree, but a bachillerato earned in Mexico is an associate's degree in the US. And so even though it sounds similar, but it's not. So, but sometimes I'm like, I'm trying to figure out, maybe that's coming from another country and I don't know what's the equivalent, but I know this is an EOC participant that's now here. They can't get a job. They're not recognizing their credential. And I truly don't know what their educational level is. And so I might include that either in other participant 19 or older, or I may include them in unknown. And so
I'm going to ask folks out there, sorry to cut you off. I was going to ask folks out there if they have any examples that they've run across, if you've ever used other participant or unknown, just in case. I don't think you're saying, Lourdes, that it's not allowable. It's allowable because they obviously ask. It's only that if you put something in 8 or 9, a pop-up window will come up asking you to, I guess they're curious. Well, who could this possibly be? Lourdes
Yeah,
gave you an
fun enough.
example. I wonder if you guys have ever run across that, or if your best practice internally has been, you know what, let's force it, or let's see if we could do some testing or assessment to put them in one of the other categories. Because number one, I don't like other or unknown personally, like professionally as a director. And, or I don't want to answer, a pop-up window and have to explain myself. Let's see what we can do to put them in the appropriate category if at all possible, or you could use it. It's there for you to use.
Yep. And at least now, looking at that chart that I've shared with you, now you know where will they be counted if I put them in this other number count, right? Will they be counted for objective 1, objective 2, objective 3, and so on. So you have a really good understanding of how that's impacting you, where you might include some in their educational level. Okay. So, but definitely if you include any one person in A8 or A9, you'll be asked to, respond to why you have somebody in that category. So let's go ahead. We've looked at admissions, financial aid. We've looked at post-secondary enrollment. Okay? And then we know that they're assessing for prior experience points this year. So the last part of the APR is once we identify participants and we indicate that they are enrolling in post-secondary education programs, then in section E of part 4, will indicate what's the type of institution where the participants enrolled. And you'll notice that in E8, this should total the number of records of numbers that we've put into D1 and D2. So
can I interrupt you? We do have a question, and I'm going to put it in the Q&A and also answer there based on what if they have an associate's degree and are back for a second associate's degree? I guess the question was regarding their standing and then how they would be impacted. Could you answer to that? Because we do have that happen a lot.
Yeah, we tend to include those individuals as a post-secondary transfer. If you look at within the description of the instructions for the APR, it says if they already have a credential and they're pursuing a second credential, then that's where you want to put them in as a post-secondary transfer.
Okay, great. And I will copy and paste. I'll go into the instructions and copy and paste that answer.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Right now we've looked at the form. This is all going to be a form. When you do submit the annual performance report, and for those of you who are new, you will see a kind of like a little checklist. It's going to say APR section 1, 2, 3, and 4, and it'll check. And if you see a green arrow, then that means that every section is complete and you can continue on with the submission. If there's anything that doesn't show a green check mark, then you need to go back into the sections, and there's kind of like a title bar at the top of the screen that will say section 1, and then you can go immediately to that section to finish what might be needed. Sometimes you might leave off something, or you didn't respond to something and it's still not complete. But if it's not complete, you will not be able to submit until you see those green check marks to indicate that all the sections are complete. You'll also have an opportunity to be able to download that PDF. And a great screenshot was something that I shared within that manual, the digital manual. And Lisa, did we give them the manual from the user manual from the APR website? If not, I can send that to you. But there is one screenshot where, and when you're in the APR, it'll allow you to preview the PDF and the PDF report even before you hit the submit button.
I'll double check to see if it's there.
Okay. Okay, good. What you'll want to do is go ahead and preview the PDF. When you log into the APR website and you're done with your APR and filled in all the numbers, when you preview that PDF, it should be what you already knew and what you understood in terms of meeting all your objectives and the number of prior experience points you will be. If that does not look correct to you, then don't hit submit yet. Go ahead and you'll be able to download that PDF and look at it carefully. You may also even want to share it with your certifying official if it is correct and say, this is what's going to be, and or if they're even requiring you to preview it before you hit submit, then share that. And then once you're confident that that's what the APR looks like, it's done, then you can log back in and you can go ahead and say, okay, submit. I want to, click that little check mark for certify, and then I want to approve as the director. Sometimes, you have your data entry person who has done all the data entry, and they want to download that PDF to share with the director, and the director is going to log in and then certify and approve. So that's another reason why you might want to download that if it's the data entry person. But you should already have a good understanding, hit submit, and then that will trigger the email message going to the certifying official to say it's been submitted. Certifying official log in, click go to trio.edu.gov, go to login, do the dual authentication, log in and certify, and then the APR is submitted. Once the APR is submitted, then everyone will get a response, an email message to say the APR has been submitted. And I know I like to keep screenshots for my own records of when the APR was submitted and things. And that will complete the APR submission process. Lisa, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Sorry, I was muted. I was just going to let you know that I put that question that was asked about the associate's degree in back for a second degree. I put that, actually we had Leah, who's on our marketing team. She went ahead and put it in the Q&A, and I put the answer there and also in the chat. So that's recorded in both places. And Lourdes, when you're referring to the APR guide, last year they had that detailed guide. I can upload that as well after it sends into the old documents, so it'll be there. Okay.
Yeah. I think that some of the tips, that we've mentioned already, getting ready with the certifying official. If you're a new director, definitely make sure that you are, on the grant award notification as the director, because we want to make sure that once the APR website goes live, that you're able to log in. And so just so that if you're a new director and you're, for you to be aware of that process, is that your institution has to, before they, allow you to become the director, is get approval from the Department of Ed. And so the Department of Ed has to update their database and say, okay, you are the director. That database is then being provided to the contractors who are maintaining the APR website. And in that database, it will identify you as the director. That's what allows you to get access to the APR website. If you're not in that database, then you won't have permissions to get to it. And so that's the other reason why we want to make sure that you are able to get into the APR website, okay? So that those permissions are set. And then also, again, secondary to confirm your certifying official, okay? Because again, that certifying official also has to be approved in the department's database shared with the contractor.
Do you mind, Lourdes, sharing the instructions document too? Because that has actually a lot of the, that's where I went back to get the question that was asked about what if they have an associate's degree and are back for a second associate's degree. So I basically copy and pasted from that. You'll find about 90 to 99% of the answers to most of your questions in the instructions. So you got to look at both documents. So I'm going to have Lourdes share the instructions and kind of go through it very briefly, where you see that definition for all these in detail, and giving you additional information. Do you have that, Lourdes, or do you want me to bring it up?
Yeah, you know what? I hadn't downloaded it.
That's okay. I can bring it up.
I got it here.
Oh, there it is. There it is. If you make it a little bit bigger, that would be great.
Yeah.
If you could just kind of do an overview of what's in there, it's very, very helpful. Even though it's for 22, 23, it's still very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And then thanks again, Lisa, for this is the draft document. But we're not anticipating major changes than to where they're referring to how they're going to integrate the, this digital signature. So right now the instructions are showing, the printing and uploading a document with the signature page, but that's not going to be true anymore. It's all going to be done in the web tool. Okay. So you'll notice that there will be some instructions, some specific instructions, for completing each of the sections. Some of the things, that I've mentioned with respect to who's being the certifying official, the warnings, who's included in which number for those sections in A1. And so here's where you'll notice that we talked about the demographic profile. Regarding the regulations, we already have, that's integral to the APR reporting process, but those are things we should have already implemented. And, our evaluation of if the participant is both first generation low income, knowing that we're following the regulations regarding how do you identify someone who was first generation, how do you identify somebody as being low income, okay? Within race and ethnicity, we typically ask that question on our participant intakes. However, the department, again, really does like for us to minimize the number of unknowns. Sometimes they just ask you, like maybe you might need to use observation if, the participant didn't indicate that, but again, try to minimize unknown values as best you can, okay? So you'll notice they have descriptions about who's included in each of the categories, those federally funded programs, the target schools if you're working with them, and the number of students. I think one of the things that is important about target schools is that if you are requesting a target school or indicating a target school here, it's not because you're asking to modify your grant in any way. That's a change of scope. And if you're changing or trying to pick up different target schools because that's how your grant was written, then you need to go through it. That's a separate process. You don't do that through the APR, okay? You do need to work with your program specialist and say, if my grant was written because I said I was going to work with XX target schools, then I'm going to request approval to change those if I have to do that, okay? Again, the total number of participants that you might indicate served outside of target schools plus those served in target schools should total the number of participants that you served in the reporting period, okay? You'll see some descriptions about who are identified as veterans or military connected, and then the descriptions for our competitive preference priorities. Again, they want to know, but they don't want to know because it'll give you a whole lot of space to say how you've implemented those CPPs or competitive preference priorities. For section 3, I read through those descriptions about the educational level at the time of first service, and so you'll only see those noted here. And then in the section 4 is where we'll report those outcomes. Okay, so really good definitions here about who included in some of those categories. You can see a second associate degree transfer. So here's where they're referring to the question that was asked, the number already obtained. If they're seeking a second associate's degree or transferring from a 2-year to a 4 years, those are some good examples. And again, those should all, A10 should total all of the participants that are served. Okay. So again, some really good descriptions here about what we're including in each one of those categories. Okay, so some things I think, we've been and looked at these objectives, but I think what's also helpful in the instructions are the definitions. And so once you get past these instructions, or what's that in there, is, look carefully at those definitions. Know the regulations if you have a question about who you're counting as a participant. But also, again, know that when you say they're a participant, and if you're ever audited, then they would say, well, where's the documentation to support that that wasn't an eligible participant?
Sometimes it's easier for me during the year when I need a definition to go to the instructions.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
So hold on to those instructions as much as you want to burn them and throw them away and say, I'm through with you till next year. Hold on to them because they really are handy when you get some questions from your staff or from you when you're trying to classify during the year in real time, where do they go? And, as regards to grade standing. And then that already tells you already what path to which objective they should be working toward. And sometimes they change status, like we said, sometimes during the year that changes status occasionally. But again, whatever you're utilizing, I mean, I just want to quickly point out that, the Bloomin' folks, Compensol folks, they will be having, I don't know when it's scheduled, I need to look, a webinar specific to their users of Bloomin' and tips on how to work on the EOC APR, utilizing that platform. I do have, and I wanted to bring her on board, I wanted to have her pop up real quickly, Gayla Harrington, who was one of our trio family, and now she is working for Lakai. Gayla, we need to go ahead and allow her to speak, I think. I was going to let her pop up, and someone had asked at our last, workshop that we had, our last webinar, wanting to know, well, what about, I have questions on this. Okay, so she's going to be joining us as a panelist. And I just wanted her to pop up here, and I'm going to go ahead and make her co-host. And Gayla, you should be able to share your screen. There you go.
I'm here.
Yes, so last time I saw you, you were in Trio, and now you're recently retired, I believe. So
I retired from Talent Search, 23 years in Talent Search, 14 of those as the director. And the 14 years that I was the director, I used Lakai as the database. So once I retired, I rehired with Lakai, and now I'm the director of customer relations. And we don't have a specific day to do this. What we're doing with each of our customers is just getting on and helping them with their each one specific needs. And
okay, great.
I helped Trudy this morning, the one that was on the other day. And
oh yes, with the Upward Bound Math Science.
Right. And I am going to put in the chat my email address.
I was going to ask you to do that. Thank you so much. So anybody out there that uses Lakai, that's a great service that they have. Compensol does too, if you could want to talk their customer service, but that's a great thing to start now, right? Gayla, so it's not at the last minute, you know what I mean?
And I put two different email addresses, the info at my Lakai. So when you said that, I was like, oh, EOC is not my strong suit, but the other people in the office, they know how to do it, and they'll teach me, but I'll figure it out. If I don't know the answer, I'll find the answer.
Great. Thank you so much.
So I definitely, anyway, so the info at Malachi is to everybody, and whoever gets it first will just get on. And if it's something specific like EOC, the EOC representative will do that. But if it's, it's pretty close to Talent Search, except for all those A1s and A1 through A8 and D1 through, those are a little different. But if you read the instructions, we can figure it out. So anyway,
thanks.
Thank you for having me, Lisa.
Well, thank you for being there. We just love to, like I said, I always tell people, I don't care what you use something and use it during the year, not just for the APR. Please, please, please.
I agree with that. If you do not put your data in, how are you going to do your report? You've got to put your data in. As a student comes into your program, just right then put everything about that student you can into the database.
My thing is, if you got to have an APR, then whatever I need for the APR, I should utilize during the year to give me the formative reports, so I always know where I'm at, especially with EOC and Talent Search, and we're preaching to the choir. Y'all know exactly what we mean there. But thank you, Gayla, for joining us. I really appreciate that. And of course, we have Lourdes, and Lourdes is also your specialty, my dear, is in student is access, right?
Yeah.
So again, if you would like her assistance, if you'll send me an email or then I can put you in touch with Lourdes to see if she can help you with any individual APR technical assistance. And, our motto here at NEC is that we help people get funded and stay funded. Well, Donna, if you wouldn't mind putting in the link, she reminded me, hey, by the way, you're having an EOC grant writing workshop next week, next Thursday and Friday. which is not an allowable cost, but it's that time of season again. Lourdes, we anticipate there's probably going to drop in May and be due in July of 2025 this summer. So Donna has put in information in the chat, and you can always go to our website as well. Go to the shop, and we have information about how you can register for that. That'll be recorded as well, but it is an unallowable cost. I want to thank you, Lourdes, again. You know that report in and out. I really appreciate your resources and all that you're sharing. We didn't have that many questions today, but I think it's because people haven't gotten into, honestly, it's right after Thanksgiving. And it hasn't dropped yet or opened up, but I tell you, though, people will be accessing this recording like crazy once it becomes live. So I don't know if you have any parting words of advice, Lourdes, for our folks there before we go off.
Yeah, just some things we've already said. Get ready early. A lot of the detail you've already know. I'm realizing I forgot to tell you how many prior experience points you'll get. So if you meet the first one, your numbers, that's 3 points. If you meet the secondary school diploma objective, that's 3 points. Post-secondary enrollment is key. That's 5 points. And then 2 points for the financial aid applications, and then 2 points for post-secondary admissions. So you can see that there's a huge stressor on that 5 for meeting the post-secondary enrollment objective.
So focus. That should tell you something, right?
Yep. Start getting your information from the National Student Clearinghouse. A lot of it's known. I don't think there's any reason why we shouldn't already have this APR complete and just be waiting for the APR website to go live.
You said it. That's my motto too. It should be, yes, as much as you can do before it comes out. Just like with the proposal, we try to get a draft before the RFP comes out, okay? Especially if most of the questions will be the same. So hopefully y'all can join us. Thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks Gayla for joining us. Thanks Donna, as always, for being our awesome support system, and Leah as well. And then Lourdes, what can I do? I can't do it without you anymore. I'm addicted. Thank you all so much. Take care. Well, this recording will be available. Yeah, I'll stop the recording now, and it will be available tomorrow, by tomorrow.